Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Became the Dragon of Apocalypse. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Two people lay on the ground, battered and exhausted after a fierce confrontation. Scattered signs of a violent clash marked the clearing, but there were no graphic details, only the heavy heaving of two friends who had been pushed to their limits. They were Issei and Saji Senher. 1 week earlier. A week before that night, Issei and Saji had spent an ordinary afternoon together. They walked and talked about their lives until, as dusk fell, they parted ways. Issei kept walking with a heavy unease that he could not shake. He reflected on the last 4 months since the defeat of Loki, the god of deception. Issei noticed that the girls had been slowly pulling away from him since then, and he wondered if Drake was to blame. Drake, Issei noted, had been curt and distant, but Issei understood that Drake had reasons for his silence. Drake knew more than he let on, yet he avoided speaking up because of the bad reputation tied to being the Issei dragon. That reputation had made him withdrawn. Issei felt sorry and sad about how isolated he had become. Meanwhile, Saji walked toward the academy with a persistent, uneasy feeling. He confided to himself that he could not explain why, but something bad seemed imminent. He hoped to reach Sonia and the others and brush the feeling aside. At the student council room, the atmosphere changed abruptly for Saji. He had approached expecting a normal visit and instead found Sona and several others together with Ryoga in a compromising situation that left him hurt and shocked. The sight made Saji feel betrayed. He told himself goodbye to the council president and fled, tears in his eyes, unable to look back. Back with Issei, his sense of dread pushed him further into the park until he stumbled onto a scene that shattered him. Issei discovered a group of girls gathered around Ranma, their attention entirely on him. The girls expressed strong affection and spoke dreamily about a future together, imagining a warm life by Ranma's side. Issei stood frozen, the words and the closeness among them cutting him deeply. Unable to bear it, he ran into the forest in the same direction Saji had taken. Both boys reached the woods and suddenly felt their strength drain away. Their bodies reacted violently. They began coughing and bleeding, symptoms of a sudden and severe affliction. Each man exchanged what they had seen, and between them they realized their betrayals had left them stunned and broken. A brief silence followed as they supported each other through the shock. What Issei and Saji did not yet know was that their dragons had sent a signal to the factions. The dragons had begun reallocating the boosted gears, stripping them from some and transferring them to semi-dragons, specifically Ranma and Ryoga. The shift in power moved like a shadow across the world, setting plans in motion far beyond what the two friends understood in that moment. As the two protagonists struggled through their ordeal, the larger struggle and escalation tied to the dragons' decisions continued to unfold, changing allegiances and shaping a dangerous path ahead. Several magical circles appeared suddenly, drawn from the heavens, the underworld, and the realm of the fallen angels. Rias and Sana arrived with their retinues, and Odin stood with Yasaka. Zerchit stepped forward and asked Issei if he knew why they were there. Issei pleaded for help and coughed weakly. Azazel announced that they would strip the boys of what they held and give it to others, and he revealed Ranma and Ryoga standing nearby with arrogant smiles. Saji cried and asked why they were being treated this way. Michael explained that the two of them were no longer useful. Rias told Issei that they had only ever used him and that Ranma was better. She insisted Ranma was respected and had already claimed his bond with each of them, and the others echoed her agreement. Sana said the same for Saji and that they would take Vitra away. Drake and Vitra reacted angrily, saying they no longer wished to be with weak partners. Issei and Saji demanded to know why. Drake replied harshly that Issei had been a disgrace, accusing him of dishonoring Drake's name, and shifted in his mind to reveal a truer, more confident self. Drake declared loyalty to Ranma and insisted Ranma would respect and cherish him. Ranma answered that they could take what they wanted and finish them off. Vitra and Ryoga affirmed Ranma's words. Michael ordered the operation to begin. The others forced Drake and Vitra out through a painful ritual. After the extraction, a brutal, fast-paced conflict unfolded in an anime-style assault. The group struck the two dragons repeatedly in a violent skirmish, leaving them gravely wounded and barely conscious. Rias said the houses were no longer useful and suggested leaving them to their fate. The group agreed and left through their respective magical circles. Valley remained silent, thinking that Issei was foolish and a weak rival. Just as Drake and Vitra were fading, a magical circle flared open and swept them away. When the magic circle had taken Issei and Saji, everything went black for a moment and the shadow of a massive gray dragon loomed before them. 10 hours later, they both awoke, feeling better but confused. Issei wondered aloud where Saji was and whether they were alive or dead. Saji admitted he did not know. A voice answered them with a chilling tone, and a figure identified himself as Traixa. Issei and Saji reacted with shock at the name and recalled that Traixa had been sealed long ago. They complained bitterly about having been used and betrayed. Traixa silenced them and explained why he had brought them. He said he had two reasons. First, after so much time in his domain he wished to depart. Second, he wanted to leave an heir to his power, and he had chosen the two of them to inherit it. Traixa declared that they would become the new dragons of the apocalypse, and that he would train them. Issei asked what had happened to their bodies, noting that they felt different yet familiar. Traixa explained calmly that, because they were dying as dragons, he had reconstructed them by infusing them with his essence, giving them new bodies while preserving their original auras. Traixa announced that their training would last 100 years, and when Issei and Saji protested loudly, he told them that time flowed differently in his realm. 100 of his years equaled 1 year outside. The two reluctantly agreed. After a century of training, Traixa admitted that they had not only met his expectations but had surpassed him in power. He expressed pride in them and noted that they could now fight with ease and without tiring. Issei and Saji stood in their dragon forms, ready and powerful enough to face even Red and Ophis without strain. Traixa stood speechless and told them to have fun and not to forget her as she said goodbye. As she disappeared forever, she shed a single tear that no one noticed. Issei and Saji bid farewell to Oto-sama. Saji, crying, said that Oto-sama would not want to see them like this because he had chosen them. Issei agreed and said he would make Oto-sama proud wherever he might be. Together they left. Issei and Saji opened a magic circle and reappeared in the forest of Kuro. They both suppressed their auras and agreed that the time had come. When they stepped back into ordinary space, the two went to the bank. Unknown to others, each had an account with $1 million. They withdrew the money, bought clothes, and purchased 2 plane tickets to New York to begin new lives as singers, planning to explore reggaeton, rock, cumbia, and more. At the Kuo airport they boarded their flight and set off for a life away from the supernatural, unaware that this was only the beginning. On the plane, Issei asked if Saji was ready for their new life. Saji said he was. Issei explained his plan. First buy a house or mansion with their combined $2 million, then purchase equipment to start their music career, record the song they had been rehearsing before coming, buy a car he'd always wanted, and seek out a band. He hoped to forget the past and move forward. Saji agreed that it was a good plan and that he, too, had always wanted a car and the chance to start fresh in New York. A year later, tensions rose elsewhere. In a meeting hall where all the factions had gathered, the mood was tense. The demons, angels, fallen angels, Asgardians, yokai, and others were assembled when Ranma and Ryoga stood and revealed the truth. They were members of the new Chaos Brigade and their mission had been to eliminate Issei Hyodo and Saji. They claimed that their operation had succeeded. The revelation stunned everyone into silence. Odin was the first to react, refusing to accept the claim. Rias demanded to know if Ranma was lying, unable to believe what she heard. Ranma dismissed her protests and explained that they had deceived the factions with pretty words and false promises. It had been easy to manipulate them and even to win over the boys' parents. Ranma sneered that many had been taken in by appearances and empty flattery, and he listed the others in a mocking tone, belittling their beliefs and dreams. He said that Drake, the celestial dragon, had been treated only as a tool, that he had taken her power and placed it in Rias's right arm, and that the marks they bore would never disappear and would serve as a lasting reminder of their betrayal. Ryoga echoed Ranma's words, telling Sana that she had been used and that those who had loved sincerely had paid the price. The remarks were cruel, intended to wound and humiliate. Before Ranma and Ryoga could leave, Serafal, who bore a similar mark, stepped forward and froze them in place. The assembled leaders reacted swiftly. Xerxes, Azazel, Odin, Yasaka, Rias, Sana, Michael, Vale, and others combined their powers in a coordinated display and struck Ranma and Ryoga with a forceful, decisive blow. The two traitors were subdued in a dramatic, non-graphic burst of energy. In the silence that followed, the group was left to confront the consequences of what had happened. Michael immediately questioned their actions with a heavy heart. Azazel and others were shaken. Remorse and uncertainty spread through the hall. Several of the women collapsed from grief, and Rias clung to the memory of Issei, mourning loudly and asking why the one man who had loved her for who she was had been lost. Odin proposed a possible solution. If the boys had truly been taken, they could search for their souls and attempt to reconstruct their bodies. Ophis, crying, volunteered to create bodies if their souls could be found, saying she owed it to them. Odin planned to search the underworld, and Michael would search the heavens. They agreed to reconvene in 2 hours. After the time jump, Odin and Michael reported that they had not found the souls in either realm. Azazel interpreted this to mean the boys might still be alive somewhere. Vale volunteered to find and bring them back, determined and hopeful, and prepared to set out on his search. A short bridge followed as plans were set and the factions organized their efforts to find Issei and Saji and to undo the damage wrought by the betrayal. Xerxes insisted that the person was alive and not a tool, unlike Ranma, who had used her. Xerxes instructed Graphia to send for Issei, Hyodo, and Saji, and Graphia, saddened, acknowledged Xerxes as Xerxes-sama and agreed to comply. The Hyodo parents admitted that they had abandoned their son for trusting someone who had not been what they appeared to be. A quiet tension settled as everyone prepared for what would come next. Rias cried and declared that she would not give up. She would search for him because she believed he still loved her and that they would be together again. The other girls affirmed their support for Rias. Rias urged Sana not to give up either. At the present time in the underworld meeting room, Michael reported that they had not been found. Everyone reacted with concern. Odin thought to himself that he could not explain why he felt those boys would appear again later. Rias insisted she would not give up. She acknowledged a mistake and vowed to fix it at any cost because Issei was hers. The others agreed, and each went their separate way to search. In New York at the airport, Saji asked where they were heading. Issei told Saji to relax and suggested they take a taxi because he knew where to go. Later, Issei revealed the place he had bought during the plane ride. A mansion they decided to call Apocalypse. Saji was stunned and asked where they would live. Issei explained that it was a surprise and that this place marked the beginning of their new life. Inside the mansion, Issei showed Saji a recording studio. They walked through it and were speechless at its beauty. Saji reminded Issei that they should start recording the song they had planned, beginning with a reggaeton track that Issei had been preparing on the plane. Issei agreed, and they began recording the new song to launch their career. During the recording, Issei performed lines expressing that he understood the other person's vulnerability and felt certain that, even if not today then soon, he would win their heart. He described an intuitive connection, how he could understand what the other carried in their mind without words, and how their looks created a special, almost angelic premonition. Saji contributed by conveying that it was a matter of time and place, a word, an encounter, a night, an attempt, and that he trusted his instincts. He described answering an inner call and tending to that desire with patience, believing they were close to the moment when their story would unfold. Issei repeated the idea of a secret shared by their gazes and the same premonition guiding them. He sang softly that their connection felt destined, that being close to one another intensified their feelings, and that they should savor the moment. Saji added an image of a perfect presence, likening the person to a princess whose face and presence he admired. He wanted to see them dance and share a quiet, meaningful moment together. The chorus returned to the shared secret in their looks and the premonition that guided them. When they finished recording the song, They took the demo to a record label in hopes of launching their release. They traveled there because they did not yet own cars. At the label, they approached the receptionist and asked to speak with the head of productions, a man known as API. The receptionist assessed them and, after contacting him, said that API would see them but warned them not to disappoint him. Saji expressed that they had just recorded a song and hoped API would represent them after hearing it. The receptionist made the call and permitted them to go up to the top floor. In API's office, the two of them explained that their group name was Apocalypse and that they wanted representation. While Saji described their music, Issei noticed an unusual, powerful presence around API and, with seriousness, asked a question about it. Issei observed that API seemed to carry an aura reminiscent of a dragon. "So if my suspicions are correct, you are a dragon," the man named API said seriously, warning them to be on guard and asking the boy how he knew. He added that he did not want lies and confirmed that he was indeed a dragon and one of the 5 strongest. Issei and Saji were surprised. Saji agreed that it was true and, recalling what Traición and Lord Odo had told them, suggested to Issei that they should tell API everything now. They could trust another dragon besides Ophis and Red. When Saji mentioned Traición, API froze and his aura intensified. Because the company was full of dragons and half-dragons, the others present grew alarmed and quickly raised a barrier to prevent further trouble. Issei intervened and asked API not to become agitated, promising to recount everything, why they had mentioned Traición and Lord Oto, and the full story of their past. API, still distrustful, agreed but warned them to be quick or he would throw them out. Issei and Saji agreed. Issei then told their story. He explained how they had been reincarnated as demons, how they had become hosts for dragons, the betrayal they suffered, their training under Traición, and how Traición had chosen both of them as heirs. He described how they had overcome those trials and achieved their ultra-dragon forms, and how Traición's death had marked the beginning of their new lives. What they had not expected was that, because the company was composed of dragons and half-dragons, API pressed a button that broadcast an announcement revealing to everyone there that Issei and Saji were successors of Traición. The revelation surprised all present. API acknowledged how much they had suffered and admitted that believing they were Traición's successors was difficult, but he accepted it. He then informed them that everyone who worked at the company was a dragon or a half-dragon. Issei said they had noticed, but that it did not change their determination. They wanted to rebuild their lives far from where they had come. Saji echoed that sentiment. API assured them that they would help dragons help one another. Issei and Saji thanked him, visibly relieved. API then changed the topic and, before anything else, asked to hear their record. They handed him the disc, and when he played it he was taken aback by how good the music was. API offered them a deal with the label Ghost. Their song would be released with a video and choreography, uploaded to YouTube and Vivo to see how it performed. He told them to come back in 2 days to begin recording. Issei immediately told the manager that he wanted the car. Issei said he did not care about the price and that he wanted it. The manager, happy, asked them to follow him to complete the paperwork. The two went inside while Saji waited outside because nothing there had caught his attention. When the process finished, the manager thanked them for their purchase and returned to his post, pleased because he would receive recognition for the best sale. Issei and the other man left the dealership with the new car. Saji told Issei that the manager had mentioned a Chevrolet dealership nearby and suggested they go look. Issei agreed, cheerful. They drove over to Chevrolet. The Chevrolet managers noticed a classic car pull up and, at first annoyed by the make, composed themselves when they realized the visitors were affluent. Inside the dealership, a saleswoman greeted them and asked how she could help. Saji said he wanted a car like Issei's, but from that brand and classic. The manager explained that a 1967 Impala, the last of its kind in America, had arrived a week earlier. Saji asked to see it. The manager showed them the Impala. Saji found it beautiful and indicated he would buy it. The manager, pleased, mentioned that the car came modified for racing like Issei's Mustang. Issei and Saji followed the manager to finish the purchase. After signing the paperwork, the dealership handed the car over to Saji. The manager hoped he enjoyed it and invited him to return. On the street, driving their new cars, Many women watched them with admiration while other men looked on with envy. They drove together, Issei in front and Saji behind, toward the house called Apocalypse Residence. Inside the house, Saji commented that it had been a very busy day. Issei agreed and reminded him that they had to meet Mr. API in 2 days. Saji acknowledged this and said they should get some rest. 2 days later, Issei and Saji headed to the ghost recording studio in Saji's car. Saji noted that today was the day. Issei admitted he was nervous about how the video would turn out. Saji also said he felt nervous but was curious to see how they would do. At the studio, API greeted them warmly and asked how they were doing. Issei replied that they were fine and explained they had come to record the song. API outlined the plan. They would film in a house set up as a casual gathering so the performance would feel natural. Saji asked for half an hour to rehearse, and API agreed. After rehearsing, Saji and Issei reported they were ready. API gave the go-ahead to record. They completed the video shoot, and the result looked very good. API asked for their opinion, and both Issei and Saji said it looked excellent. When Saji asked when it would be uploaded, API said it was already online. API then discussed the next step. If they had another song ready, they could plan a concert. Issei confirmed they had finished another track. API decided they would schedule a concert in a week and a half, leaving them that time to practice. He also noted that the new song would be kept as a surprise for the audience. The secretary then arrived with exciting news. The song had reached 6 million streams in just 5 hours. API, Issei, and Saji reacted with astonishment. API told them to come back in a week and a half for the concert where they would truly be introduced to the public. Okay, so he was leaving shoo. Saji agreed. Issei said goodbye. As Issei and Saji departed, API marveled at how much they had done in so little time. The secretary confirmed that the tickets would be ready for the promoters to sell tomorrow and excused herself. With the protagonists alone, Issei remarked that things were going well. Saji agreed and asked which song they would perform that day since they had several choices. Issei decided they should start with a strong number and suggested Gangsta's Paradise. Saji accepted and they set to work. At the mansion, the two were watching television when the channel changed to Music TV New York. The reporter announced to viewers that a new group called Apocalypse had burst onto the scene 8 hours earlier with their debut single, which had already reached the top of the popular music charts despite being reggaeton. The reporter, Margarita, noted that the group seemed versatile and that they were represented by ghost recordings. She added that API, the owner of the company, had some news and moved to an interview. Margarita asked API whether it was true that his company was backing the rumored new group. API confirmed the support and explained that the group was small, just 2 members for now, but had potential to grow. He emphasized that the public seemed to be supporting them and that the duo could play many genres. API announced that, in honor of their logo, they would give the group a concert in which they would perform the song everyone was talking about, plus a surprise. He said tickets were already on sale and encouraged viewers to buy them before they sold out. The reporter thanked him and returned to the studio. Margarita informed the audience that several established artists would attend to evaluate the new group, listing acts such as Grupo Canaveral, Vico C, Kuilo, Shakira, and Grupo Santa Rosa. She said they would record live and wait to see what surprises the group would bring. Issei and Saji grew excited at the thought of being evaluated and hoped everything would go well. A week and a half later, they arrived at the venue nervous but ready to show their talent. API reminded them to impress the audience and the evaluators. They promised not to fail. Meanwhile, in the underworld's meeting hall, all factions and leaders who had once opposed the protagonists gathered, anxious. Azazel asked whether there was information on the protagonists' whereabouts. Rias said they had not found Issei. Sana reported they had not located Saji, and Zerchitz expressed frustration at their failure to find them. Odin said they had to continue searching because they needed the two's help and wanted them to return. Grafia suggested that the government would learn of the situation soon. Michael was about to speak when the doors opened and Milikas entered with several family members in tow. Milikas, the 12-year-old son of Zerchitz and Grafia, had brought along the parents of Rias, Sana, and Razor. Rias asked what they were doing there. Milikas explained that he had promised that for his birthday he would gather everyone and do what he wanted, and what he wanted was for everyone present to watch the new group Apocalypsis perform at their first concert. Zerchits protested that this was a serious matter and that they had promised but could not indulge the child now. Odin intervened and insisted they at least let the boy show them. He had nothing else to do and it had been promised. Michael agreed that it could be interesting. Gabriel admitted curiosity about the rumored surprise song, and Serafal joined the others in deciding to stay. Rias told Milikas to play the stream, and Milikas said the concert was being broadcast from New York. They all agreed to watch. Time passed and the protagonists prepared for their first concert, which was being streamed live worldwide. The public had responded well to their debut album. In the underworld meeting room, the factions and leaders watched the live performance, exchanging thoughts and uneasy feelings. Rias wondered aloud what kind of duo this would be. Zerchits noted that Milikas had only heard the song through a video that had circulated online in places like Mexico, Chile, and Japan but had not yet reached Kuo. Milikas confirmed this. Each woman present felt a strange pressure in her chest as they watched. Even the group accompanying Dona sensed it. The celestial dragons thought quietly among themselves. Drake felt that the presentiment suggested something both ominous and significant. Vitra, who had recently parted ways with Saji, felt a strange, melancholy sensation. Ophis described the feeling as a mixed premonition of good and bad and hoped the outcome would be positive. In New York, Issei told Saji they were ready and excited about the surprise they planned. Saji admitted he could hardly wait. The two were happy. API encouraged them to go out and surprise the evaluators. They took the stage to an enormous crowd. 500,000 people had bought tickets, and seats had sold out. The presenter greeted the audience warmly and the show began. The presenter introduced the new group, announcing that this duo had broken records by reaching first place on the song charts. The audience erupted in cheers, chanting the group's name. Issei and Saji stepped onto the stage and showed their faces to the world. Issei greeted the crowd enthusiastically. Saji first thanked everyone for the opportunity to be known and asked the audience to make some noise. The crowd cheered back. Saji explained that they would start with the song that had made them famous, and counted them in to begin. They performed, and the music filled the venue. In the underworld, those who had once betrayed the duo watched the performance in stunned silence. Sana whispered that she could not believe what she was seeing, while tears formed in Rias's eyes as she said they had finally found Issei and that she was relieved. The other girls stood speechless and in shock. The leaders gathered and reacted. Odin remarked that no one would have expected these youngsters to be the duo called Apocalypsis. Michael expressed gratitude that they had been found. Yasaka, still recovering from shock, said that at last they could bring them back. Zerchits addressed Issei by name, relieved that they had been found. Azazel moved to interrupt the sentimental moment and reminded everyone that they needed to bring them back. Before Odin could respond, Rias insisted that of course they would bring them back, noting how important Issei and Saji were to her. Sana agreed that they should be brought back so things could be set right and they could all be together again. Irina added that they would not let them go this time because they loved them. Gabriel declared that, by his faith, he would bring them back and that they would finally be a happy family. The group voiced their support for the idea. Odin then cooled the mood, asking whether they truly believed the pair would return given what they had just been doing on stage and warning that the two might even seek revenge. A hush fell over the room. Tanin, the dragon king who lived in the underworld, stood among them, appearing as a 2-meter-tall humanoid dragon. As people discussed the twins, Tanin grew serious and prepared to speak, but the room opened with a flash, and the Dragon of Dreams appeared. The Dragon of Dreams looked grave, even compared to Tanin, and then transformed into a human form. Tanin addressed the newcomer with fear and respect, calling him the Dragon of Dreams. The Dragon of Dreams asked everyone to listen and said that something important had been noticed. Zerchits asked what he meant. Tanin explained that Issei and Saji bore the soul of the Apocalypse Dragon and that they were pure dragons, perhaps even surpassing Triexa. The revelation left everyone stunned. The Dragon of Dreams said that what he was about to relate had once been only a dream. He recalled being in a great darkness when the silhouettes of 3 dragons had appeared. In that vision he had heard the dragons tell him that Issei and Saji had surpassed him and the king dragon Traixa, and that he should be proud of them. He had been shocked, but the voice continued, saying that the time of that dragon's end had come and that he would give his soul to those he named as supreme successor dragons, the successors of Traixa, the dragon of the apocalypse. The dragon in the dream had thanked Issei and Saji. The dragon of dreams finished the memory and told the assembly that, from what he had investigated, Traixa had rescued Issei and Saji when they were left near death. Traixa had given them new bodies and souls, raising them to a level that might now even surpass his own. This information terrified the listeners. The Dragon of Dreams added that, before Traixa died, the young men had told him that they would form a musical group in his honor. At the time the Dragon of Dreams had thought it a joke, but now it seemed true. He also said that the two did not want anything to do with the supernatural. The revelation devastated many in the room, as their past mistakes now had direct consequences. Back at the concert, the duo had just finished their first song and the audience applauded loudly. Issei told the crowd that they had 2 surprises for the evening. He explained that the first surprise would be a new song they had written, and Saji added that the second would be a song that symbolized them and those who accompanied them. The audience cheered with excitement. Saji introduced the new song, saying it was called Gangsta Paradise and hoping the crowd would like it. The audience quieted down to listen. Their music industry observers noted that the young duo had real musical talent and might be worth working with. After they finished the new song to thunderous applause and shouts, Saji reminded everyone that the first surprise was done and that the final piece of the night was still to come. Issei invited the audience to enjoy the closing song, which was called The Greatness of Forgiving, and they began to perform it. Issei and Saji thanked Traixa, explaining that he had taught them so much they even considered him a father figure and were very grateful. Traixa returned their thanks and announced that this was his farewell. He explained that he would give the remainder of his energy to them, laughing softly as he admitted it felt strange to leave, but that they had earned his respect and affection. Before departing, he asked what they planned to do after leaving and whether they intended to seek revenge for what had happened to them. Issei said that he had spoken with Saji and they had decided not to pursue revenge. Instead, they would distance themselves from the supernatural and dedicate themselves to becoming singers. Saji confirmed this plan, adding that both of them could play guitar and sing. They revealed that the name of their band would be Apocalypse as an homage to Traixa. Issei agreed. The record label representative then asked them to sign the contract so they could join the label. Issei and Saji signed the papers. The representative reminded them to return in 2 days, and the young men thanked him before leaving. The label representative smiled and commented that he had a feeling these young men would become great in the future, chuckling as he hoped for their success. Outside the record label, Saji asked Issei what they should do next. Issei replied that they should go get cars. They headed to a dealership together. At the Ford showroom, the manager greeted them and explained that they carried all kinds of cars. Issei said he was looking for something special and asked whether they had a 1969 Ford Mustang. The manager responded that the Mustang was very expensive and likely not what they expected. It was the last of that year, kept in the vault, and had been outfitted with performance upgrades including nitrous. Issei requested to see it, and the manager led them to the vault. When they arrived and the lights were turned on, Issei was captivated by the beauty of the car and felt an immediate, deep admiration for it. The vehicle was a modified 1969 Ford Mustang enhanced for racing. Imagine Issei as Vicosi and Saji as Gilberto. People listened and began to applaud for how beautiful the song was. Even in the underworld, everyone present, including the dragons, listened and felt moved by the music. Next chapter. The interview and the factions traveled to New York in a certain district. After the concert, people approached the protagonists to ask for autographs and photos. Flashback. As the protagonists walked, a group of fans approached. One fan asked for an autograph and a photo, and all the others echoed their excitement. They did not realize they were being live-streamed. In the underworld, tension rose among the leaders. The women projected a fierce determination. Rias felt upset about anyone trying to get close to Issei. The crowd exchanged jealous remarks. Back with the band, Issei apologized with an embarrassed laugh and offered his shirt as a friendly gesture. The crowd reacted with excited gasps and exaggerated anime-style swoons. A few fainted from the overwhelming excitement. A fan thanked him and ran off with the shirt. Saji teased Issei about the reaction, and Issei laughed nervously. Afterward, Issei and Saji went to speak with their manager, API. At the meeting with API explained that because many people had supported them at their first concert, an interview had been arranged, and when the interview took place their songs would already have music videos ready to be shown. Issei and Saji gave their consent. API told them he would see them the next day to record. API then asked them to get tattoos. Issei would get a symbolic emblem and Saji would get one on his arm, both having specific meanings for their image. Both agreed. The protagonists drove back to Issei's mansion and went to their rooms to sleep. The next day at the studio, they discussed the video and choreography with API. Meanwhile, in the underworld, the faction leaders discussed a matter they considered very important. Odin declared their intention to go after the boys. Azazel agreed, saying they would do it at any cost. Xerxes insisted they had to bring the boys back and restore things to how they were before. Michael wondered what would happen if the boys refused to return. Rias proposed holding a raiding game, and the plan to go to New York was set. Back with the group, Issei asked if they were leaving. API said he would go with them and would also take them to a place to relax and have fun. API asked whether they had cars, since he had never seen them. Saji and Issei showed their vehicles in the parking lot, and API admired both cars, revealing his own in return. They decided, for the sake of showing off, to each go in their own car. They departed separately. Later, arriving at the location where the interview would be held, many people stood in the street waiting for them. Tabloid photos of their cars had stirred public interest. The crowd pressed in until security arrived to manage the situation. Outside, a reporter asked API whether they would show the 2 new videos of the group's latest songs. API confirmed that they would. A journalist asked Saji about the classic cars, and Saji indicated the cars and said that the question answered itself. Issei asked to be allowed inside so they could answer all questions there. The interviewers agreed. Inside the studio, the host Fani welcomed the group and introduced Apocalypsis as the special guests. Issei and Saji entered to applause. Fani asked how they were after their first concert. Saji explained that they were very happy and that API had given them the opportunity to perform for the public, which had gone well. Fani mentioned that API would present the 2 surprise music videos they had prepared. Issei confirmed that after showing the videos, the songs would be published on YouTube Vivo in about an hour and asked for the audience's support. Production was asked to play the first video, and the first music video, titled Gangsta Paradise, began to play. The audience wept and applauded for the beautiful song. Many of the women blushed at the sight of Issei and his tattoo. Even the interviewer, Fani, showed a flush. Fani asked why they had chosen the song and the lyrics. Saji explained that the song represented how they were like brothers and had always supported one another. Fani asked whether Issei's tattoo was real. Issei confirmed that it was real, and everyone reacted with surprised faces. Saji commented that it was something he had to do but that it looked good, and the interviewer shifted the topic to ask if they had plans for another music video. Issei and Saji answered that they did, and it would be released in about a month. Fani thanked them for the interview and said her goodbyes. Outside the interview, API told the trio that he had a surprise for them and asked them to follow. They left the building and walked toward a lively private venue for the evening. Elsewhere in New York, a group who had been labeled The Unwanted arrived and took a taxi toward the studio to speak with the protagonists, not knowing that they were about to encounter an unexpected situation. Back at the venue, Saji asked API why they had been brought to this place. API explained that it was meant to be a memorable surprise and that everyone should enjoy the night. Before Issei could respond, a charming young woman approached and drew him away, and something similar happened to Saji. API made a light-hearted remark about the night ahead. A short time later, a large group arrived seeking the apocalyptic duo. The arrival party included several prominent figures from the underworld. The venue's secretary answered their questions. Rias asked whether the duo was still there. The secretary said they had left about an hour before. Irina and the others pressed for more information, and the secretary pointed out that the duo had gone to a private party at a nearby venue roughly 20 minutes earlier. When the word party left her lips, an eerie, supernatural aura gathered around the women, causing the men present to become very uneasy. Rias thanked the secretary and the group moved on. 20 minutes later, the women from the underworld arrived and entered the venue together. API immediately sensed that they were not ordinary guests. Issei's mother also appeared, looking displeased as she addressed one of the young women sharply. Rias asked once more whether the apocalyptic duo could be found there. The employee responded, now smiling, that those young men certainly knew how to make people feel special. The comments stoked intense jealousy and anger among the visitors. Their auras intensified and the men who had accompanied them grew even more fearful. Ophis, showing a growing impatience, demanded to know exactly which room the pair were in. The employee pointed down the hall and toward the special room at the far left, adding that the two were inside having a private gathering. The women's resentment mounted. Issei's mother spoke in a furious, threatening manner. The assembled party Sana and her retinue, Rias and her group, Gabriel, Ophis, the dragon allies, Seraphal, Penemu, and many others prepared to confront the scene they expected to find. When they opened the door, the women felt a painful shock, a mixture of sorrow and rage that weighed on their hearts. Only Issei's mother reacted with utter fury. The visitors could hardly believe what they thought they had discovered. To be continued. Problems begin, Part 1. That evening, the protagonists had been enjoying themselves at the private gathering. The arrival of the visitors interrupted them. Issei's mother called out his name in a voice he instantly recognized. He turned at the sound, embarrassed and unsettled, and tried to compose himself. Saji paused, took in the arrival of Sana and all the underworld contingent, and despite the tense atmosphere he dressed and moved to stand beside Issei. Saji demanded to know why they were there and told them off, insisting that Issei and he were fine and that they were living their own lives. Sana and several others insisted that it was obvious why they had come. They wanted to set things right and bring Issei back to the underworld. Rias pleaded that Issei should return with her. Seraphal invited him to join them so that everything could be happy. Drake asked for forgiveness and a second chance. Irina called for prayer so that his perceived transgressions might be absolved. Kaneko stepped forward and apologized to Issei. Saji reminded them that he and Issei had made their choices and did not want to be forced back into anyone's plans. Vitra begged Saji for another chance on behalf of all present, tears in her eyes. Issei and Saji answered firmly that they did not want to see them and that they should leave their lives alone. They accused the visitors of having caused the downfall of the dragon and of bearing scars from other dragons, and then told them, bluntly, to disappear from their lives. The confrontation ended in a bitter stalemate as emotions flared and both sides stood their ground. Issei and Saji were already turning to leave when Issei's mother grabbed his arm and insisted that he come home with them, that he was family and belonged with them. Issei looked at her with no expression and told her coldly that his parents were dead to him now and warned her not to touch him again, or he would kill her. Issei's mother began to cry and begged for forgiveness, admitting her mistakes. Issei answered that her greatest mistake had been writing him off and giving him up, and told her to leave him alone. Rias stood up, outraged, and demanded how he could speak to their mother that way. Issei snapped back at Rias, calling her the group's betrayer and accusing her of playing with him. He said he had given everything for their happiness and that she had ruined it, and then he told them all to forget him and go their own way. The girls lowered their heads in shame and began to cry. Without warning, Xerxes transported everyone to a pocket dimension. Xerxes apologized to Issei and explained that this was necessary. Azazel urged the group to leave the past behind and move on. Odin referred to his companion in perversion as they all felt the place begin to succumb to a power far beyond what they had known. Michael fell silent as pressure overwhelmed the area and everyone present felt it pressing down on them. Issei and Saji spoke in distorted voices, accusing the others of imprisoning them and vowing that no one would dare challenge them. In that moment, the two began to transform, assuming the forms of dragons. The transformation filled everyone with a sense of dread. Ophis, emotionless, warned everyone to stay back. Office explained that the power they were witnessing rivaled not only the legendary forces they knew but also their own, and declared that Issei and Saji were undoubtedly heirs to Triexa. The assembled factions recoiled in shock upon realizing this forgotten detail. Azazel cursed under his breath at their oversight. Drake observed that these were true dragons and noted the unusual intensity in their eyes, his reaction drawn out in exaggerated anime-style droplets of surprise. Issei cut off further talk and prepared a powerful fire-based attack, and Saji prepared to strike as well. The factions reacted by forming defensive shields to protect themselves. Before the attack could land, API arrived, commanding everyone to stop. API's entrance was imposing, accompanied by a group of powerful-looking dragons. Saji expressed surprise at API's presence. API introduced himself calmly as the manager of the group accompanying him and asked why there was so much commotion. Zerchitz explained that they intended to have Issei and Saji join them. API replied that those two were under his protection and that joining was not possible without his agreement. Rias tried to protest, but API silenced her and proposed an alternative, a challenge in the form of a rating game, Saji and Issei against all of them. He suggested that this might be their last chance to reconcile things. After a long, serious deliberation, the factions accepted the proposal. API declared that the contest would begin. Issei and Saji exchanged grim smiles, each determined to make them pay for past wrongs. Sometime later in the future, Issei and Saji walked through a park with their respective partners and a bundle wrapped in a blanket. Issei expressed his gratitude to his partner for coming into his life and for what their family had become, speaking with heartfelt warmth. His partner returned that sentiment, and they remembered how their relationships had started and the way Saji's sister had fallen for him. They prepared to leave together, making sure everything was packed and that they would both release their new music. With that, they set off. Back in the present, the protagonists stood within a pocket dimension watching the factions below like they were ants. The faction leaders remained unnervingly calm, which worried API. Michael questioned whether their plan would work. Odin insisted that it was their last method to recover Issei and Saji. Azazel asked what would happen if it failed, and Zerchitz grimly suggested that they would have to say goodbye to their lives. API gave the signal to begin. The factions readied themselves, and Zerchitz directed Team DXD and the Student Council to go first. Rias rallied her allies, determined to bring Issei and Saji back. Issei and Saji surged forward to end the conflict quickly. One of Issei's opponents, Sana, pleaded with Saji not to fight and to come with them instead. Saji refused, saying that they had toyed with his feelings and that he and Issei had suffered deeply because of it. He declared that this had to end now, and if necessary he would destroy anyone who interfered with his life. Saji unleashed a massive plume of flames toward the Student Council, but Ophis reacted immediately and acted a shimmering barrier that absorbed and deflected the attack, protecting those targeted. Ophis then demanded to know what was happening as tensions rose and the confrontation intensified. Rias warned that the attack would kill them and begged for mercy, pleading that they should be forgiven. Saji declared that, as he had already told everyone, if it was necessary he would kill them. He launched himself into the fray alongside Issei. Rias pleaded with Issei for forgiveness, appealing to him not to destroy them. Issei answered that everything they had known of him had already been taken by them, and now they would pay the consequences. He prepared a powerful strike meant to end the conflict. A brilliant light erupted from the opposing leaders, halting the confrontation and turning their dragon's attention. What everyone saw next left them stunned. Standing there were the ones who had taken everything from them, Ranma and Ryoga. Ranma asked where they were and what had happened, only remembering that some unlucky foes had sealed them. Ryoga shrugged, unsure as well. Suddenly 2 loud sounds froze everyone as 2 enormous dragons revealed themselves. The dragons lunged at Issei. Issei announced that he had wanted to have them in his claws. Ranma demanded to know who he was. Issei explained that he was someone who had lost everything and, because of that, had gained power beyond imagination. Ranma sneered and insulted Issei, calling him useless even as he transformed into a dragon. All present stepped back to watch the clash. The fight between Issei and Ranma was fierce. Issei bit one of Ranma's wings, damaging it, and Ranma fired a torrent of energy that struck Issei's face and staggered him. The two locked and grappled with brutal force. The surrounding spectators retreated to get a better view. Issei and Ranma exchanged devastating blows. Ranma leapt and launched a clawed strike at Issei's chest that landed. The impact worried API, who watched in horror, while everyone else recoiled at the intensity. Ranma's claws snapped during the exchange, leaving him temporarily weakened. Issei laughed and taunted Ranma, calling him a weakling and vowing to destroy everything he held. Suddenly Issei struck from behind with a powerful tail sweep that sent Ranma crashing to the ground. Before Ranma could recover, Issei tore at Ranma's wings until Ranma could no longer take to the air. The assembled fighters watched in stunned silence as Issei gathered his energy and unleashed a devastating magical blow that obliterated Ranma's presence on the battlefield and created a massive impact site. The onlookers froze at the sheer force of it. Issei roared to steady himself and turned his attention to Saji's fight. On the other side, Saji and Ryoga fought without yielding. Ryoga struck Saji with a tail, launching him through the air, and followed with a powerful magical assault that hit Saji head-on. Ryoga let out a triumphant roar, only to notice Ranma lying motionless and become consumed with fury and grief. He charged forward in blind rage. In response, Saji struck decisively, landing a blow that incapacitated Ryoga. Ryoga collapsed, unresponsive. The four dragons Issei, Saji, Ranma, and Ryoga had clashed with such intensity that the tension forced everyone present to their knees. API and the others watched, filled with a mix of fear and respect for the alpha forces they were witnessing. It was clear that only two dragons would survive this final confrontation. Issei and Saji rose and roared together, asserting their dominance, and API and the others followed with a resonant response. The factions that remained trembled at the sight. Issei and Saji advanced slowly, intent on bringing the battle to a close. To be continued. The protagonists approached slowly, and the factions before them remained silent, trembling with fear at what might happen. Odin stepped forward, causing astonishment across the gathered faces. The dragons watched in shocked silence. Xerxes asked if Saji and Issei intended to do something to them and what they planned to do. The others fell quiet, leaving the dragons to speak. Even Ophis seemed powerless to intervene, and Drake and Albion looked uneasy and sad at what might come. Issei explained that they would cast a spell to keep the factions from approaching. Rias pleaded with him not to do it and begged him to think of those who loved him. Issei ordered them to be silent and demanded they say he had shown mercy, insisting that otherwise they would already be dead. He challenged them to decide if they wanted to die. Drake begged for another chance, suggesting they could form a family and be happy, tears in her voice. Saji told the others to move on with their lives and forget them. Albion begged for a return, calling for the names of loved ones and imploring them to come back. At that moment, Saji and Issei raised their auras so powerfully that everyone felt the pressure and bowed in deference. Issei declared that he had given a chance and now he was angry, and he prepared a massive, concentrated attack intended to eliminate the factions and leave the dragons in charge. API interrupted and urged calm, proposing they reach an agreement. Saji threatened to kill them to rid himself of the burden, warning API that he would die with the others if necessary. API fell silent. Saji and Issei began to unleash their attacks, but before Issei's strike could land, an unknown force teleported all the supernatural beings away to somewhere unknown. The two dragons believed they had finished the factions. When the barrier dissolved, everything was quiet, fear and respect kept people silent. API said goodbye and told them they would meet tomorrow to continue the discussion. The next day, the dragons gathered in API's office, talking about unimportant things. Elsewhere, the noble circles of Rias and Sona mourned, and the dragonesses Drake and Vitra cried as well. Rias said that the last thing she remembered was Issei threatening to kill them and that she did not know what to do. Sona admitted she felt the same. Xerxes tried to comfort his sister and promised to do everything possible to bring Issei back, but Rias said she felt helpless and that every attempt only made things worse. Michael offered comfort to his sister and changed the subject by asking where they were. Azazel, regaining his awareness, observed that the place looked like a meadow and that he did not know where they were. An elderly bearded man appeared and introduced himself as Rick, explaining that he had brought them there to speak seriously. Rick said that he understood the supernatural world because he had been watching them, and he had noticed their efforts to earn forgiveness. He suggested that the present women had already begun to let go and were resigning themselves to their lives without the others. Rick offered them an opportunity, but he warned that accepting it would require giving something in return. Sona asked what the cost would be. Rick explained that they would have to give up their memories. The women reacted with shock and refused. Rias declared that she would never give up the memories she still had of them. Rick fell silent. It was a shame. That had been the only way to be with them, and Eros would not force anyone who did not want it. While this unfolded, the faction leaders remained silent. Elsewhere, with the protagonists, they had just finished speaking with API about releasing a new song. The track was ready and would be released that same afternoon under the title Duncan De Chu Somewhere. When the song came out, the public erupted in admiration. Issei and Saji believed they had no more problems now that everyone thought the factions were gone, but they were mistaken. The factions were not dead, though they intended not to bother the pair. As the dragons enjoyed their rising fame, the factions met with Rick. After Rick explained the terms of the agreement, all the allied factions accepted with reluctance. Rick instructed everyone to form a line in front of Ami. Once the group was aligned, Rick asked them to look at Ami, made precise motions with his hands, and invoked a secret temporal technique that would erase certain memories and feelings from body and soul. With those final motions and words, everyone fell unconscious. Rick reflected that his task was complete. He spoke to himself about repaying a debt to his brother Triex and hoped his brother was at peace, noting that he had left behind powerful nephews. Rick decided he would present himself to them later once they awakened and he could explain everything. Back with the protagonists, Issei observed that Saji had given him the feeling they had just shed a great burden. Saji agreed but confessed that he also felt they would meet someone important soon. Issei admitted he felt the same and told Saji to enjoy life for the moment. Saji agreed. Their new success made them both very happy. API appeared to congratulate them on the album's success and informed them that they would have a concert in Mexico in 1 week. API suggested that after that final show they should take some time to rest, and he told them they would depart the day after tomorrow. Issei and Saji acknowledged that they needed a break and agreed to enjoy their free time in the meantime. They spent the evening relaxing and sharing a bottle of apple brandy, an indulgence that made their dragon companion laugh. After Rick's action, everyone in the factions was baffled and asked what had happened. Rick explained the current situation but deliberately omitted the fact that he had erased certain memories and emotions. Still confused, the leaders returned to their respective factions. The supernatural memories related to Issei and Saji had been altered so that, for most people, those elements no longer existed. 1 week later, everything proceeded according to plan. Issei and Saji arrived in Mexico for their concert to a sold-out stadium. The crowd overflowed with excitement and joy, and the night filled with songs of various styles that had the audience dancing. After the final number, as Issei and Saji descended from the stage, they noticed twin girls about their age who were being ushered away by security for having snuck in to see them. Saji stepped forward to intervene and told the guards to treat the young women with respect. A guard apologized and explained that the twins had slipped in to watch the show. Issei assured the guard that they would take care of the situation. The twins stayed with Issei and Saji, who found them to be charming. An hour earlier, after security left them with Issei and Saji, the twins had been studied appreciatively by the two singers. Issei asked for their names. The older twin introduced herself as Sandra and the younger as Liz. Saji asked what they needed, and Liz, blushing, explained that they wanted to meet the singers and receive autographs. Saji, a little flustered, said that was easy and that he saw no problem with meeting them. Issei, briefly distracted by Sandra's presence, quickly returned to the conversation and agreed, suggesting they go eat at a nearby restaurant. Saji liked the idea and the four of them rose and headed to the parking lot. On the walk to the cars, Saji asked whether they should travel separately or all together. Issei deferred to the girls and asked what they preferred. Sandra suggested they all go together, and Liz agreed. Issei then showed his car and Saji showed his, leaving the choice to the twins. Both cars were admired, and Sandra, asserting her role as the older sister, made the decision about which vehicle they would take. The narrator noted that the reader already knew who Issei and Saji were. Fani expressed amazement and asked the group why they left those lyrics and what had inspired the song. Issei explained that part of the lyrics came from things that had happened to him, Ami, and Saji in the past, and that they preferred not to talk about it. He added that they had visited many places in New York and that there had been complications, so they had recorded one of the scenes at a school. He also mentioned that the young woman in the video had been an extra. Fani said it had been very beautiful and that it showed how much the two supported each other. Saji agreed. Fani then introduced the next song and announced that it was called The Greatness of Forgiving. After that moment, an exaggerated anime-style sweat drop appeared on everyone present and Saji leaned toward Issei to tease him, saying that the others would boss him around and never let him be. Issei told Saji to be quiet and reminded him that they had not agreed to start dating the moment they met them. Saji shrugged and kept smiling. Liz asked casually about which car they would take. Sandra replied that they would go in the red one. Liz teased that both of Issei's cars were red, and Sandra laughed, pointing specifically at Issei's car. Issei invited them to get in. Saji encouraged Liz, and Liz blushed before agreeing, which Saji found very sweet. Issei called to Sandra and she took his hand, which made Issei blush. Realizing what had happened, Sandra blushed and let go, and Issei noticed. He gently took her hand again and told Sandra not to worry, that it did not bother him. Sandra remained silent and continued to blush as they all got into the car. The drive was calm and uneventful. They arrived at the restaurant, had a pleasant dinner, and enjoyed themselves. On the way out, the protagonists walked the girls to their homes. At parting, the girls gave them a brief, affectionate peck, which left the two men embarrassed and smiling. 15 years later, two 10-year-old children were playing with API in a studio. These children were the offspring of Issei and Saji and their respective wives. Over the years, the couple's relationships deepened and healed a mutual emptiness they had carried. Sandra and Liz had married and become mothers. Sandra had a daughter and Saji's wife had a son. Both children were around 10. The whole family had gathered at the API office and the atmosphere grew tense because the nephews were about to meet their uncle, the brother of Triexa. When he introduced himself, the nephews cried at the sight of a relative they had come to regard as a father figure. Their spouses and children watched happily. The scene felt like a clearly joyful family reunion. As for the factions, they continued to carry that inner emptiness without remembering the details of the past. Perhaps time would bring answers. Time would tell.